Much has been written and spoken about the German election, but one scenario that really wasn't factored in was the possibility that Angela Merkel could win an absolute majority. We're joined by the former US ambassador to Germany, John C. Kornblum. Good evening, Mr. Kornblum.
Good evening.
It is conceivable now, looking at the polling data, that Angela Merkel could be the first chancellor since Konrad Adenauer in 1957 to achieve an absolute majority. What does that mean for Germany?
Well, above all, it means that people have voted for the status quo, because she, first place, it's important to remember that her own parliamentary group is made up of two parties, the CDU, which has about 90% of the country, and the CSU, which is in Bavaria. So she would be having to govern with the CSU, which is sometimes more difficult than governing with the SPD.
Right.
But in general, what this says is that people like Angela Merkel, they like what she's doing, and they like the status quo. And there have been several blemishes on her record, as you know, in particular energy policy, but also foreign policy. But they seem not to have made one bit of difference, and the CDU has improved its vote by 5 or 6%.
How do you think that would play? I mean, the idea of an absolute majority. I mean, you know, the German constitution is written in such a way that power is very finely balanced, and you know, the history of German elections, with that one exception, is of coalitions. Will people be comfortable with the idea of a chancellor with a majority?
Well, the conventional wisdom is that Germans don't like majority government, and that, as you said, the law is written so that you almost have to have a coalition government. If the way things stand right now, the last time I looked at the estimates, she would have maybe 2-vote majority, which is not exactly a resounding mandate to make changes and to do things. So the question still is going to be, even if she maybe gets a mathematical majority, is that enough to govern, or does she have to look for another partner?
Yeah.
And there are only then two partners, the SPD and the Greens.
Right, right. So let's broaden this out a little bit then. Do you think that this has any impact on Germany's position in Europe as a whole?
I think what it does is simply confirm what Merkel has been doing. That's certainly how she's going to see it. But the important thing here to note is that what Merkel has been doing is, on the one hand, trying to avoid anything dramatic, especially on the euro issue. But at the same time, she has been sending out very clear messages that she herself wants to have a different kind of Europe. She wants to have the kind of Europe, I don't want to overdo this, but kind of Europe that Mr. Cameron wants to have. A Europe which is based more on national identity and by among the responsibility of the leaders in the European Council rather than the responsibility of the Commission. And I think the high vote for the AfD, which is usually called an anti-Europe party, they say they're not anti-Europe, they're just anti-this Europe. And so that, if anything, strengthens her will probably to make some changes in this direction.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the AfD, because obviously this scenario we're painting about, you know, an absolute majority it all hangs on their turnout. What is the fact that they've done pretty well? This is a party that, you know, only came into being something like 9-10 months ago. What does that tell us about the state of politics in Germany and the strength of the anti-European feeling in Germany?
Well, I think that you see a clear trend against the European Union as it is. I keep putting it this way because almost any German you talk to, whatever party he or she is from, will say, of course we're for European unification, of course we're for Europe. This is so much a catechism of German politics that nobody would dare not to say it. But what you see under the surface is that people, and this has not just started yesterday, this has been going on for 5 or 6 years, people are getting very frustrated with the Commission. They're getting very frustrated with meddling. They're getting very frustrated with the way the money is spent in the European Commission. And so I think there is a clear trend in Germany, and I think in other countries. The Dutch have in fact just done a white paper on this, to try and redress the balance between the member states and the Commission to the detriment of the Commission.
So just very briefly then, what you're saying then is the AfD, the alternative for Germany, is not so much an anti-Europe, I mean, what you said earlier, is not so much against the whole European project, it's just they don't particularly like the way, perhaps post-Lisbon, the way the European Union is heading.
Yeah, and they also, of course, have made their election campaign on the basis that the voters weren't being told the truth.
Sure.
And there is a good enough minority of people who are mad about the way things are going that also, I'm sure, got them some votes.
Excellent. Mr. Kornblum, thank you very much for your time.